This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News. I'm Sophie Ikenye. Our top stories. Fresh sanctions for the Democratic Republic of Congo. The EU is taking aim at top officials, including a presidential candidate. Suspected Boko Haram militants attack 3 villages and a camp for their displaced victims. Witnesses say 17 people were killed.
Our people are really facing problems. They can't go 3 kilometers to carry out their normal activities because Boko Haram has surrounded these areas.
Fleeing for their lives, 21,000 people leave their homes in Somalia after a particularly violent month. Also in the program, where have West Africa's fish gone? We'll bring you a special report from Senegal, where fishermen's livelihoods are under threat.
Every year we get less and less fish. Everybody is aware that there is no fish in our waters.
And in sport, Leicester City manager Claude Puel says the team's weekend Premier League fixture will be played in honor of the club's owner who died in a helicopter crash on Saturday. Thanks for joining us on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The European Union is set to renew sanctions on 16 senior officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo, including Emmanuel Ramazani Shadary, the presidential candidate backed by current President Joseph Kabila. Now, it's reported the sanctions will be reimposed on the 12th of December, just a few days before the long-awaited elections. And as preparations continue for the poll, new electronic voting machines are causing controversy. The country's Electoral Commission says the machines will cut costs and help the voting process, but many are worried they could be used to rig the result. Louise Devast reports from Kinshasa.
For months, opposition parties have been protesting against the planned use of electronic voting machines made in South Korea, saying they could be used to cheat. But the Electoral Commission in the country insists on using them, claiming it will save them $100 million. Demo machines are being set up to educate voters on how to use them. Voters approach the screen and insert their polling card. Once the card is validated by the machine, pictures of candidates appear on screen. Voters can make their pick by either pressing on a picture or on a green or red box. They have 3 choices to make: a presidential candidate, a legislative candidate, and a provincial candidate. Once they're all confirmed, the ballot is printed from the same machine and the voter can check his or her 3 choices. Then the ballot goes in a box. Ballots will be counted by hand. There will be an electronic tally, but these will be used for validation purposes. And in case of discrepancies between manual and electronic returns, the manual results will prevail.
Using these electronic voting machines means that there are additional factors to consider. Are there enough emergency batteries? Have all the technical staff been trained? And of course, the logistical question is a big concern in this vast country with poor infrastructure. Will they manage to transport more than 100,000 machines in time for the elections?
I'm worried about fraud because those who manipulate the machines could change some features and change the results of the election.
I don't like this. These machines, they're here to steal from us. We're fed up. We don't want this. We want normal elections.
The government and the Electoral Commission insist elections will be held as planned on December 23rd. But 2 months ahead of the polls, only half of the machines have arrived in the country, and opposition parties have not yet made a unanimous decision on whether or not to accept these machines.
Louise Devast there reporting. Now let's bring in Riza Okoy. She is from the BBC's Afrique. There are a lot of issues that have come up in the run-up to this election. What are they?
Many issues, as Louise was saying in the report. At the moment, we're focusing on the voting machines, but other issues have already been raised, which are the security issues, mainly in the whole country. As you know, there is a crisis in the Kivu, but there's a security let's say, insecurity pushes everywhere on the country. So there's this security issue. There's also a health issue with the Ebola outbreak. So you know that more than 200 people have already been involved in this crisis, in this health crisis. This is a big concern in DRC. And I would say the other issue is also the refugee issue. You know that some Congolese people have left Angola and are now back in DRC, and most of them are in Kasai, the Kasai region, which is in the center of the country, where there's already a dire humanitarian crisis.
So a lot of issues that still need to be dealt with. What about the sanctions? What more do we know about that? And especially the fact that, you know, the preferred candidate for the outgoing president, so to speak, is
Absolutely.
Facing sanctions.
One of them. So it's not the only one. Obviously, there's more candidates. I mean, not more candidates, more politicians, especially from the ruling party, that are actually targeted by these sanctions, the EU sanctions. But it's something that is really important to know is that the Congolese government thinks that this is not something to worry about, because they consider this is illegal. So from their point of view, the sanctions are illegal, and they think that it's unfair to actually face travel bans or, you know, to freeze their assets. For them, it's something that is
totally
illegal. So they'll
still go ahead even if they are under sanctions. I wonder though, because the opposition held a meeting in South Africa a few days ago,
yes.
And we still don't know what progress has been, what agenda they have, and what the solution is.
Yes, it looks like at the moment the opposition is also very they're not really trying to they're trying to find a way to agree on one candidate, one unique candidate for the whole opposition, but at the moment it's not the case. The good thing is that, or the important thing to note is that they really don't want to postpone the election. So at the moment all that we know is that they still want to meet and to find this solution to get one candidate to unite all the opposition, but at the moment we are still waiting for this person to know who this is.
All right, Raiza Okoye, thank you for that update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, let's now take a look at other stories making the headlines across Africa and the rest of the world. A prominent Ethiopian human rights lawyer, Mirza Ashenafi, has been elected as the first woman to head the country's federal Supreme Court. It's the latest promotion of women to top jobs. Last week, Saleh Work Zewde became the country's first president, a ceremonial position. Prince Charles and his wife Camilla have met the Gambian president Adama Barrow and his wife Fatou Barrow during the first leg of the Royals' week-long African tour. The Gambia was readmitted into the Commonwealth after abruptly leaving 5 years ago. To Nigeria now, where authorities say suspected Boko Haram militants have attacked 3 villages and a camp for displaced people in the northeast of the country. There are conflicting reports on the number of casualties. Authorities say at least 8 people were killed, but witnesses say the number of those who died is up to 17. Now, the simultaneous attacks happened on Wednesday night on the outskirts of Maiduguri, that's in the capital of Borno State. The BBC's Ishak Khalid reports from Abuja.
This is what the villagers woke up to after a night of heavy gunfire and violence. Suspected Boko Haram insurgents set the villages on fire, looted food items and shot people dead. Hundreds of residents fled into the bush. The latest attacks have once again highlighted the vulnerability of communities in northeastern Nigeria.
Our people are really facing problems. They can't go 3 kilometers to carry out their normal activities because Boko Haram has surrounded these areas and are watching over every movement.
The suspected insurgents also attacked a camp in the village of Dalori on the outskirts of Maiduguri. The camp was home to thousands of people displaced by the decade-long violence caused by Boko Haram. At least 2 people were killed when the shelter and a nearby market were set on fire. The Nigerian military says its troops battled the attackers, but the militants left behind huge destruction.
Boko Haram wanted to take all the items in the camp. Then the officers in that military checking point exchanged fire with them. But Boko Haram have sophisticated weapons.
Despite repeated claims by the authorities that Boko Haram has been defeated, the insurgents have stepped up attacks in northeastern Nigeria in recent months. Military compounds and villages have been repeatedly targeted, as it is thought the group are in need of weapons and food supplies. All this as Nigeria prepares for general elections in February next year. Ishaq Khalid, BBC News, Abuja.
Let's stay in Nigeria for a moment, and funerals have been taking place for dozens of members of a Shiite Muslim group apparently killed in clashes with Nigerian security forces. The government says 6 people died following clashes with the military, but rights groups estimate the figure to be around 50. Now, the U.S. diplomatic mission in Nigeria has released a statement urging the government to conduct an investigation and take appropriate action against the perpetrators. This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Sophie Ikenye. Still to come in tennis, South Africa's Kevin Anderson prepares to take on Japan's Kei Nishikori for a place in the quarterfinals of the Paris Masters. Mimi will be here with all the details. I'm Sophie Ikenye and you're watching Focus on Africa from BBC World News. The top story on this program: the European Union is set to renew sanctions on senior officials in the Democratic Republic of Congo, including the candidate backed by President Joseph Kabila. Now, a spike in violence in Somalia in October has forced 21,000 people to flee their homes. That's according to the UNHCR Protection and Returns Monitoring Network. Many have ended up in makeshift camps. Overall, there are 2.6 million people displaced in the country. Ahmed Adan has more from Mogadishu.
The renewed violence has been happening mostly in southern Somalia regions. The Somali army has carried out military operations against the militant group Al-Shabaab in some regions like Hiran, Middle and Lower Shabelas and Jubaland to remove them from some of their bases. Also, the militant group have attacked 2 Somali army military bases in Bai region close to Baidawa town. Those all violence and crisis affected hundreds of people who fled from their areas to nearby towns. Most of them have fled and escaped to Mogadishu town and joined other thousands of people who fled from droughts and violence in their regions. Those people who have previously been in the city's IDP camps and the newcomers have been received very little help from the government and local NGOs.
For more, let's speak to Evelyn Airo from the Norwegian Refugee Council, an aid organization which works with displaced people in Somalia. Thanks for taking time to talk to us. Now, we've just had a brief description of the situation there from Mogadishu. Describe for us the kind of burden that Mogadishu is under.
Now, fighting and insecurity has displaced 21,000, and these have joined the overcrowded camps in the urban areas. With insecurity, there is also little access to those that are affected by the conflict. The needs are dire. There is need for food, water and sanitation. There is also need for shelter, because the majority of those that have been displaced are living in flimsy shelters in already overcrowded camps, and also they lack protection from the day rainy season. We need to make sure that the casualties are also minimized, and the needs remain there. And then when you look at the children that have been displaced are also vulnerable. And if you look at the situation of children in Somalia, 294,000 children in Somalia are severely malnourished, and of those 55,000 are acutely malnourished. That makes the situation worse.
You describe quite an alarming situation. I wonder though whether the government is helping at all with the situation.
The thing is, we are asking, as the Norwegian Refugee Council, we know that Somalia has received humanitarian aid worth 857 million this year, but there has been a sharp drop from the 1.3 billion that they received last year.
Why has the funding been scaled back?
This has, just because of the usual humanitarian aid, a drop in the humanitarian assistance that has come. So what has happened is that this sharp drop in humanitarian aid has resulted in limited assistance. So this gap affects the kind of assistance that the displaced people receive.
So then what have you been able to do so far?
We have been able to respond much easier to those that are in the camps that have been overcrowded but in the urban areas. But for those where there is limited access due to insecurity, it's very difficult to access them with humanitarian assistance. But because of our experience dealing with similar emergencies, we are working with the local partners in some of those inaccessible areas to make sure that they're able to reach those that are unable to access humanitarian assistance. So we are trying to work with the partners that are local, that are in those areas, and trying to make sure that these people get access to shelter, access to food, access to water, and access to health, and any other assistance that can be provided to them.
All right, Evelyn Nairo, thank you for bringing us up to speed with the situation there in Somalia. Thank you. Now, West African waters are some of the richest fishing grounds in the world. Around 7 million people in the region depend on fishing for their livelihoods, while up to 400 million rely on fish as a food source. But the UN estimates that around 300,000 jobs have been lost in the artisanal fishing sector due to a lack of policies protecting the industry. Now, this in turn could lead to food shortages. In Senegal specifically, fishermen are pulling in smaller catches as big companies harvest the ocean for the popular local fish sardinella. So, what is going on? Who or what is to blame? The BBC's Alfonso Daniels traveled there to find out.
Thousands of traditional boats called pirogues in Senegal's oldest fishing community, St. Louis. For generations, this town has fed the nation, but now it's in peril.
It is a disaster. We don't have fish here. Every year, we get less and less fish. Everybody is aware that there is no fish in our waters.
The species especially at risk are pelagic or open sea fish like sardinella, which migrates up and down the West African coast. People in this region depend on this once cheap staple for up to 75% of the animal protein.
Everyone you speak to here is truly alarmed by what's happening. The decline of fish stocks here is truly staggering. According to the government, last year the amount of fish caught in these waters declined by 80%. That means that Senegalese fishermen in St. Louis, here and in other parts of the country have to travel far and wide to find fish, even if that means crossing into foreign waters.
For years, artisanal fishermen have cast their nets in the rich waters of neighboring Mauritania, especially as it became harder to catch fish in their own shores. But 2 years ago, the Mauritanians booted them out, and their catch plummeted. Fishermen say they don't have a choice and still cross the border illegally, even if this means risking their lives. Earlier this year, the Mauritanian Coast Guard killed a young fisherman from St. Louis called Fallou.
On Sunday, they told me that they went out fishing. The Mauritanian Coast Guard shot them, and a Senegalese fisherman was killed, and it was Fallou. They said they shot 9 times, and the 10th bullet hit Fallou's neck. He died instantly. Yes, it's tough. It's really tough. Because when I wake up, I sometimes have trouble finding something to give my children for breakfast.
Mauritania says it's trying to protect its resources and create local jobs. But is this true? Across the border in this vast desert state, we found a surprising sight. Endless rows of fish meal plants turning fish into powder and exported mainly to China to feed other fish. And it's mostly made from sardinella. This is a hungry industry with 5 kilos of fish required to produce just a kilo of fish meal. Critics say, in reality, it creates few local jobs. Most factories are also foreign-owned, and the fish they process is mostly caught by big foreign trawlers. So now, local artisanal fishermen are endangered here too.
Our main problem is overfishing. Foreign trawlers, which are authorized in general to fish small pelagics, but in reality fish everything. The fish they capture ends up being sold abroad or ends up being used to produce fish meal or fish oil. This impacts traditional fishermen enormously.
Last year, Mauritania turned almost half its catch into fish meal. There are now some 30 of these plants across the country. This is production on an industrial scale. Back in St. Louis, fishermen bide their time. With the mounting struggle to survive, many of them are making a fateful choice To stay and hope for the best, or join the exodus of migrants trying to reach Europe. The Atlantic off West Africa was once one of the world's richest fisheries, providing jobs and feeding millions of people across the region. But if a solution isn't found to the massive plunder of these waters, they and the communities they support could soon be effectively empty.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's find out what's happening in the world of sport. Mimi.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Leicester City manager Claude Puel held his first press conference today since Saturday's helicopter crash, which killed the club's owner along with 4 other people. Puel, who was visibly emotional, said that the match on Saturday against Cardiff City was not important. The Frenchman added that it was the players' decision to go ahead with this weekend's Premier League game.
Playing football has not been at the front of our minds this week. But for this weekend and all matches thereafter, we will play to honor and remember a man that did so much for our club. We will continue the Leicester City he built.
Now, one player who will be missing from Leicester City's fixture on Saturday is Ghana international Daniel Amate, who's recovering from surgery.
Daniel has had a surgery. It was a success, but he will be not available during normally 4 months. And I was with his sadness after the game.
Now, over the past few months, Ghanaian football has been embroiled in bribery and corruption allegations. And on top of that, there were doubts whether the country would be ready to host the Women's Africa Cup of Nations, which kicks off in just over 2 weeks. But in the second part of his interview with the BBC's Thomas Nadi, Ghana's Deputy Sports Minister, Perry Okujato, says the Women's Continental Showpiece is a chance to turn a new chapter and bring back trust in the game.
As we speak, the National Stadium is almost ready and we're going to be in good shape towards the tournament. Those timelines on our side did not work for other people on the other side. However, we were confident that we were going to make the timelines and beat the deadlines. The CAF team has been here for the whole of last week, and then that culminated in the draw last week Sunday.
What is the ministry doing to restore faith in sport in this country, considering the recent expose of alleged corruption in Ghana football?
The high-level meetings between the President of the Republic and the President of FIFA, the high-level meetings between the ministry led by the Minister and CAF, the normalization team that has been put together by FIFA, that has begun work, the support that they have gotten from the ministry, the state agencies that are in charge of making sure that people who have flouted the law are prosecuted and investigated. All of this, we hope, at the end of the day, will help reassure the nation, bring back the confidence that people want in the game, the fairness, and to weed out the corruption that has engulfed, our games here in Ghana.
To some tennis, South Africa's Kevin Anderson will be on court a little later as he takes on Japan's Kei Nishikori. This year's Wimbledon finalists sealed a place into the third round after beating Nicolas Basilashvili in 3 sets, 6-3, 6-7, 7-6 at the Paris Masters on Wednesday. Meanwhile, Tunisia's Malik Jaziri has been knocked out in straight sets by America's Jack Sock. And that's all the sport. Back to you, Sophie.
Thank you, Mimi. Thank you for that. Well, of course, don't forget you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm at @CKenya. And for the very latest African news and current affairs, go to our website, bbc.com/Africa. For now, thank you for your company. Bye-bye.